Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to our forecast, or you can check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. You can also email us here at the message on the bottom there, and you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Starting off for today, we're going to take a quick look at what the Climate Prediction Center, CPC, has to say about our 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook and temperature outlook in a moment. Now, this is a forecast for the 6 to 10 day period, and what this is doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be higher amounts of precipitation in these areas that are more darkly shaded. It just means that there is a higher probability of above normal amounts of precipitation. So that is much of the central and eastern part of the state, to include southeast Alaska. In these areas where we don't see anything, that means that the CPC expects there's fair odds of it being about normal in terms of amount of precipitation. As we move to this next one, this is for the temperature outlook, again over a 6 to 10 day period, or from day 6 through day 10. And here the areas of these warmer colors, seeing the oranges into the reds, those are areas where we are looking at higher probability of above normal temperatures. So all along the Brooks Range, up along the Arctic coastline. And then as we look down over southwest Alaska, around the Bristol Bay area, again a higher probability of seeing above normal temperatures there. Much of the mainland parts south of the Brooks Range going to be about even odds of seeing normal temperatures. And as we look down over the southeastern part of the state with those bluer colors there, we do have higher probability of seeing below normal temperatures over the southeastern part of the state. Again, that is for days 6 through 10 from today in that temperature outlook. As we look now at our fire danger, we can look out over much interior part of Alaska, all seeing at least high probability there for fire danger, pushing out towards the Kivalina area and down over the Yukon Delta area. And also here in the Copper River Basin area, we do have high area for fire danger there as well. Only areas of extreme are right there in the central interior, right by the Bettles area. So watch out for any kind of outdoor activity. Fire danger is high and extreme in those locations, again, especially for the central parts of the interior. Looking now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off here in southeastern part of the state. We have a weak low pressure system out there in the eastern part of the Gulf that's really starting to diminish, but it does bring up quite a bit of moisture, seeing a lot of cloud cover out over the southeastern part of the state, also bringing in a lot of rain to that area as well. Taking a look now out over the far western part of the state, we do have another area of low pressure here just south of the Aleutians, pushing slowly to the south and east there, bringing up some rain for the eastern and central Aleutian Islands. As you look out over mainland Alaska, you can see as we start off here in the morning hours, we do have quite a bit of clearing out over much of the state, but as we watch this loop, you can really start to see a lot of cloud cover develop as we're seeing a lot of afternoon convection there. And we're seeing a lot of thunderstorm activity within that for much of the south central area, up through parts of the interior and further out west as well, including up towards the western parts of the Brooks Range. Along the Arctic coastline, we can see some clearing here in the afternoon, but as we start this loop over, we can see a lot of darker cloud cover there up along the Arctic coastline, showing us a lot of low stratus up there. But as we watch, we'll really start to see that diminish as we get those higher temperatures in the afternoon, that sun activity really starting to break away some of those lower clouds and push it back off over the Arctic coastline. So as we look at our weather for the remainder of the day along the Arctic coastline, not going to see a whole lot of activity, but we are going to see continued activity of thunderstorms throughout much of the Brooks Range, upper Yukon Valley, out towards the western parts of the Brooks Range as well, throughout parts of the central interior, down along the Alaska Range, down towards the southwestern part of the state. However, as we get closer towards the Yukon Delta area, going to see more showers that should not be thunderstorms. Then as we look along the west coast of the state, some areas of fog lingering out western parts of Kotzebue Sound, down over much of the Bering Sea, including towards the Bristol Bay area, with our low pressure that is pushing off to the south and east, bringing rain to the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. And as we look down, parts of south central as we get closer towards the southeast, towards the Yakutat area, going to see more rain showers, not as much in terms of thunderstorms. And then as we get towards the southeastern part in the Panhandle, going to see a fair amount of rain, but that should not see any thunderstorms out there, with our low that is quickly diminishing out over the eastern part of the Gulf. As we move into tonight, going to continue to see rain over the Panhandle area to include Yakutat, but out over much of mainland Alaska, going to start to see those thunderstorms and showers in general diminish throughout the night. However, there will be some lingering in areas around the Bristol Bay area, up the Aleutian range into the Alaska range, and continue to see rain showers through much of interior part of the state. But as we get along the Arctic coastline, even though we had a lot of that cloud cover diminish throughout the day, it is going to come back in overnight, bringing in some snow with it. Still cold enough up along the Arctic coastline for snow. And then as we move to the west of Barrow, going to continue to see fog out there, but not in much in terms of snow. And then down along the west coast of the state into the Bering Sea, you're going to see some areas of fog there stretching from the Bristol Bay area all throughout the Bering Sea towards the western Aleutian Islands, as we have higher pressure coming in from the east, with our low slowly tracking off to the south and east, still bringing in rain to the eastern and central Aleutian Islands for tonight. And as we move into Friday, our high pressure slowly pushing into the east, but continuing to see its effects out over the Bering Sea, with fog stretching from the western Bering towards the Bristol Bay area once again. Our low now almost becoming stationary there, but still bringing up enough moisture to see some rain for the Unalaska area. As we move out towards the mainland part of the state, we are going to see some showers developing throughout the day. We have a lot of thunderstorms on the chart here, but we are going to see those develop primarily in the afternoon hours for Friday. So going to start off with a lot less precipitation out over mainland, especially in that southern portion. That's going to continue to increase throughout the day, especially in the afternoon, and also mainly over mountainous terrain. Higher elevations are going to see more of the showers and more of the thunderstorm possibility. That's going to include areas around Bristol Bay, up through the south central and southern parts of the interior, eastern parts of the interior as well. And then as we move up towards the eastern parts of the Brooks Range and upper Yukon Valley, potential for some thunderstorms out there. But as we get further off towards the west, going to see less in terms of thunderstorms, but still could see some rain showers out there. And then even further to the west from the Norton Sound through much of the west coast, shouldn't see a whole lot of activity for those locations. And then along the Arctic coastline, going to see some lingering effects of the snow and fog up there, especially from Barrow to the east. And as we get further off to the east, warm enough to see that mix in with some rain. And down in southeastern part of the state, continued rain showers throughout much of the day on Friday. Moving into Saturday, high pressure really starting to build in over eastern parts of the Gulf is going to diminish a lot of the rain over the Panhandle area, but still lingering through much of at least the morning part on Saturday. As we move into the south central, going to see a lot of rain showers, but a lot of the thunderstorm activity now is going to be primarily over the Aleutian Range up into the Alaska Range, all the way around the Alaska Range towards the eastern parts of the interior as well, extending up once again towards the upper Yukon Valley and eastern parts of the Brooks Range. But as we move off towards the west, going to diminish the thunderstorm chance, but we will still see a lot of isolated showers anywhere from the Kotzebue Sound area down through Seward Peninsula area, including areas around Gamble. And then we will have the thunderstorm possibility pick back up as you get closer towards the Bristol Bay area, especially in the mountains surrounding the region. Again, much of the thunderstorms and showers from mainland Alaska are going to be primarily active in the afternoon hours, not as much activity in the morning hours, especially for the thunderstorms, which shouldn't initiate until the afternoon. And as we look out over the Bering Sea, seeing our high pressure out west continuing to show the effects, with a lot of fog still remaining throughout the day on Saturday, throughout the western Bering Sea, stretching out towards eastern parts of the Bering Sea and Nunavik Island there on Saturday. And our low that's relatively stationary, still slowly pushing off to the south and east, bringing rain to the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian Islands on Saturday. Taking a look now at our temperatures as of 2 p.m. this afternoon. In the mid-40s to mid-50s for the Panhandle area, with the warmest as we get closer towards the Gulf and further to the north, with the Haines area seeing 56 degrees this afternoon. Mid-50s to mid-60s for the south central area, with the coldest locations being Kenai there at 56, Kodiak at 54, and Middleton Island at 54 degrees. But the interior locations getting to be warmer in the mid-60s there, with Glen Allen up to 67 degrees as of 2 p.m. this afternoon. Into the interior part of the state, southern and eastern parts of the interior, mid to upper 60s there, but getting into the 70s as we get into more of the central and western parts of the interior, with Bettles up to 72 this afternoon. And then as we get along the Arctic coastline, mid-30s for the most part. As we push further off towards the west, we are going to see temperatures in the mid-40s to mid-50s as we push further to the east, with Kotzebue getting up to 50 degrees this afternoon at 2 p.m. Upper 50s to lower 60s for the Norton Sound area. And out there at Gamble, only getting up to 48 degrees as of 2 p.m. Let's look now over the southwestern part of the state. Coldest as we get off to the west, Macoriac only 46 degrees this afternoon, but Bethel 63 and Antioch up there at 64 degrees. All throughout the 50s in the Bristol Bay area, getting up to the mid-50s for places around Cold Bay, but much of the rest of the Alaska Peninsula going to stay right around 50 degrees at 2 p.m. And then we have mid-40s for the Aleutian Islands, lower 40s there at Shemya, 41 degrees. And for St. Paul, 46. St. George was at 45 degrees. Lows for tonight going to stay pretty similar for Shemya, only dropping down to 40 degrees. Mid-40s throughout much of the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands. A lower 40s there for the Pribilof Islands. For the southwestern part of the state, starting in Bristol Bay, lower 40s there. Mid-40s for the YK Delta area. Then the Seward Peninsula, warmest on the southern side, 48 degrees expected low for Nome, but only getting down to the mid to upper 30s for the Kotzebue Sound area, dropping just below freezing along the north slope, and then only down into the mid to upper 40s for much of the central and western part of the interior. Eastern part of the interior getting a little bit colder there, Eagle down to 38 degrees, and then dropping down to the mid-30s to mid-40s for much of south central, with Glen Allen getting the lowest there, 37 degrees, and then down in the Panhandle area, mid-40s all around. As we move into tomorrow for high temperatures, getting up into the mid to upper 50s for the Panhandle, Skagway, Haines area getting up to around 59 degrees for tomorrow. Getting up into the 60s for many locations around the south central, with Talkeetna getting a little bit warmer there, 70 degrees. 70 degrees for much of the interior. Fort Yukon getting up to as high as 73 degrees, and that corridor of high temps stretching down over southwest Alaska, including the YK Delta and Bristol Bay area. But as we get along the Arctic coastline, only getting up into the mid to upper 30s until we get places further to the west, going to see temperatures in the mid to upper 40s there, with Kotzebue getting all the way up to 52 degrees. Then in the Norton Sound area, mid-60s for the most part, and then Gamble going to stay a little bit colder there, 44 degrees. Down into the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, upper 40s to the lower 50s, Alaska Peninsula being a little bit warmer there, and St. Paul going to get up to 48 degrees for tomorrow. Looking at our aviation weather, we have MVFR and some IFR conditions with a lot of the fog that we're seeing out there over the Bering and Aleutian Islands. Similarly, along the west coast from the Kotzebue Sound area, along the north slope, going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions there. Also down in the areas in the northern part of the Panhandle, to include the Yakutat area, going to see some MVFR conditions in the morning. That's going to hold through the afternoon hours for that same location. We are going to have some thunderstorms popping up tomorrow afternoon, and those can bring IFR conditions pretty easily if you get caught in some heavier showers. Then we have along the Arctic coastline down through Kotzebue Sound area, MVFR and IFR conditions expected. And then holding fast in the Bering Sea, we have our fog that's going to bring us some MVFR and IFR conditions extending down into the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at our passes, our northern passes, Anaktuvik should be VFR as well as Adigan Pass. But now as we move to the south central passes, we are going to see primarily VFR conditions, but for all these ones in the south central, we are going to have some thunderstorm possibility in the afternoon that could pretty quickly drop conditions to IFR if we get stuck in those thunderstorms. So Rainy Pass also going to see VFR, potential for thunderstorms. Windy is going to be similar, as well as Isabel Pass. Mentastipas also going to be VFR with the potential for some afternoon thunderstorms that could drop conditions down to IFR. Tenita Pass is going to be the same, primarily VFR, as well as Portage VFR with the potential for lower conditions in those thunderstorms. And then Chilcoot and White should be in VFR throughout the day tomorrow. For our freezing those, we have a pocket of colder air over the Yakutat area and some more cold air along the Arctic coastline. You can see why we have that snow coming in, especially overnight. And some warmer air coming in from way far out to the west. For our icing area, between 2,000 and 4,000 feet over the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, rising up to between 6 to 9 out over the central Bering Sea, extending out over southwest, between 7 and 10,000, and then between 6 and 9 as we push to the central interior and upper Yukon Valley areas, between 3 and 7,000 feet over the Yakutat area, including parts of the central and northern panhandle. For the jet stream tomorrow, we have a jet streak out over the southern part of the panhandle, around 60 knots out of a southerly direction. Northerly flow 55 going through much of the western part of the state out over the Bering and through the central Aleutian Islands, around 60 knots there, but the strongest core are going to stay to the south, 120 knots out of that westerly direction. For the 9,000 feet, we do have northerly flow 10 to 15 knots, getting higher as we get in the southern Bering, around 25 knots there. And then as we move out over the southwestern part of the state, not a lot of strong winds out there, variable 10 knots. Then out over much of mainland Alaska, westerly flow 15 to 20 knots, circulating around the slow pressure, highest on the eastern side, around 25 knots there. Then westerly flow out over the panhandle 15 to 20 knots, increasing pretty quickly to 25 as we move further inland. 3,000 feet, pretty similar, 15 to 20 knots over the panhandle area, 10 to 15 out over much of mainland Alaska out of that westerly direction. Strongest flow around this low just off the Arctic coastline, 30 knots out of an easterly direction. Then out much of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, a weaker flow 10 to 15 knots out of a northeasterly direction, picking up as we get in the southern Bering again, around 25 knots there. Then a quick look at our turbulence. Not a lot of turbulence for any part of the state unless we get in one of these areas of thunderstorms from the Bristol Bay area up through the upper Yukon Valley, to include a lot of the south central as well. Shouldn't be very much turbulence for most locations, again, unless you get stuck in one of those thunderstorms. We can see a lot of turbulence there. And if you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Waking Up with Venus. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. I know we normally focus on what's up in the evening sky.
That's because it's often more convenient for people to view the sky after work or right before bedtime. Plus, most people are night owls like Dehne. But this week, we're going to wake up early and check out the sky before dawn.
That's right, James. We're setting our alarms, waking up early, seeing the stars, and then going right back to sleep.
No way. You have to stay up at least until sunrise.
Okay, but don't expect me to be my usual bubbly and effervescent self.
Just don't hit the snooze on this show, because we have a really bright planet for you to watch.
Oh yeah, okay. Now I'm excited because we get to wake up with Venus. Let's show you.
Okay, we're up bright and early, ready to greet the day. It's about 90 minutes before sunrise and we're facing east. Dehne, stop yawning.
I'm awake, I'm awake.
The world around you is still asleep. It's so quiet and peaceful, and there are some amazing stars to observe.
I have to admit, this is pretty cool. And the first thing that catches my eye is a really bright object just above the eastern horizon. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the dazzling planet Venus. Way brighter than any star, Venus definitely commands your attention.
At the beginning of the year, we were observing Venus in the evening sky. So she was the first star you saw just after sunset, low in the western sky. Back then, she was the evening star.
But a few months ago, she switched over to the morning sky and can be seen just before sunrise in the eastern sky. So now she's the morning star. Same planet, different time of day. When we look at Venus in a telescope this week, it'll look more like a half moon. Venus reflects a lot of sunlight toward Earth, and from this angle, this week, we can see half of the daytime side and half of the nighttime side of Venus.
If we want to fly to the planet and see the whole thing, it will be quite a trip. Venus is over 75 million miles from Earth this week. Unfortunately, from above, there wouldn't be a lot to see.
Venus is perpetually covered in clouds. These clouds reflect a lot of sunlight and trap in a whole lot of heat. So Venus, although farther from the sun than Mercury, is the hottest planet.
That's right. The surface of Venus swelters at around 900 degrees Fahrenheit.
Venus will be hanging out between 3 constellations. Aries the Ram will be above Venus, Pisces the Fish will be up and to the right, and the head of Cetus the Sea Monster is just below her. If you can't make out a ram, 2 fish tied together with a string, and a vicious sea monster, you're not alone. They are tough to imagine.
Let's advance time day by day to see what happens. On the morning of June 18th, the waning moon is coming into the scene. And on June 19th, it's a waning crescent and is appearing a little closer to Venus. And on June 20th, wow, it'll be really close to Venus. So close, I think we can consider it a conjunction.
James loves a good conjunction, but I think it might look even better on the morning of June 21st. You'll see an even slimmer crescent moon with Venus up and to the right. As we move our time to 5:30 and eventually to sunrise, the moon and Venus rise up as the sky brightens.
And you may be able to see them both all the way to sunrise, and maybe even a little bit beyond. Venus is that bright. So get up early this week to check out Venus before dawn.
Even if you're a night owl, it is totally worth seeing it with the moon nearby.
And now that you've watched a sunrise on June 21st, guess what? It's the first day of summer.
Awesome. I'm glad I woke up early. What a great way to start the season. Keep looking up.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. Starting off in the Kotzebue Sound area with the warmer temperatures, we are seeing a rapid diminishment of the ice in that area. And then also a lot of the shore-fast ice from the Point Lay area up towards the Barrow area really starting to diminish now, starting to break away, especially that shore-fast ice. We can even see some areas of the shore-fast ice that have pushed off from the main pack there. However, areas from Barrow through about Kaktovik, we are seeing a lot of that staying pretty steady out there, even though we do see a little breaking up. That's primarily due to some of the rivers feeding in some warmer water to those areas, but the main pack of ice still pretty solid up there between Barrow and just west of Kaktovik. But in the Beaufort Sea, we are seeing some of that ice breaking up there with some warmer waterway out to the east. Taking a look at the main part of the marine forecast, starting off in the southeast, we do have southwesterly flow out over the eastern part of the Gulf, anywhere from 10 to 20 knots, weakest as we get further to the south. Southerly flows get in the inside waters 15 up to as high as 25 knots as we get further to the north. Then on Saturday, flow in a southerly direction in the inside waters 10 to 20 knots, highest up towards the north. And then kind of an east or westerly flow out over the northern part of the eastern Gulf, 15 knots there, dropping down to around 10 knots as we get into the southern and eastern parts of the Gulf. Friday forecast for the south central part of the state, primarily a southwest to westerly direction, around 25 knots for most locations. A little bit different there in Prince William Sound, easterly flow 15 knots there. Seas only around 6 feet out over the Gulf. Then on Saturday, a southerly direction, 15 to 20 knots for most locations. Southern part of Cook Inlet a little bit stronger there, around 25 knots, and weaker once again in Prince William Sound, southeasterly flow around 10 knots there. For the Alaska Peninsula, we have weaker winds on the Bering side, 10 to 15 knots. Stronger as we get to the Pacific side, but a change in direction here. Easterly flow south of Sand Point around 20 knots, and then southwesterly flow as we get closer towards Chignik. And we have that southwesterly flow out around 15 knots there. Seas 4 to 6 feet on the Pacific side, 2 to 3 Bering side. Then on Saturday, still weak flow out over the Bering side, 10 knots of wind with about 2 feet for seas. Then we have northeasterly flow south of Sandpoint around 20 knots, and southeasterly flow as you get towards the Chignik area around 15 knots there. For the Aleutian Islands, we do have primarily northeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots for the most part, and then northerly flow out over the western Aleutian Islands around 15 knots there. On Saturday, diminishing down to 10 knots, variable flow around 4 feet for seas, and still primarily a northeasterly direction, 15 to 20 knots, seas highest on the Pacific side, 6 to 7 feet. So look along the west coast of the state, primarily a westerly direction in the northern locations around 15 knots, becoming more northerly towards the Pribilof Islands around 15 knots there as well. And then south of Nunavik Island, we are seeing southwesterly flow around 15 knots. Then on Saturday, a primarily westerly flow for most locations, 10 to 15 knots. Along the Arctic coastline, easterly or northerly flow out to the east, 10 to 15 knots there, becoming more northwesterly as we get along the west coast of the state, 10 to 15 knots there, seas 3 to 5 feet, highest as we get further to the north. Then on Saturday, we're seeing northerly flow around 20 knots over the west coast. So get along the Arctic coastline, easterly flow there, 10 to 15 knots. Quick review for the state tonight. We are going to see a lot of the thunderstorms that we're currently seeing diminishing, but some lingering showers over areas around Bristol Bay, up along the Alaska Range and parts of the central and eastern interior. We're going to have lower stratus and fog coming back in over the Arctic coastline, bringing in some snow with that from areas from Barrow to the east. Southeastern part of the state, going to see some rain continuing throughout the night. Then out over the Bering Sea, a lot of fog from western Bering out towards the Bristol Bay area. Then some areas of rain for the eastern Aleutian Islands and central Aleutian Islands. But as we move into Friday afternoon, thunderstorms expected Bristol Bay area up through the interior towards the upper Yukon Valley and south central part of the state. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thank you for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.